Hi, this is Jerome, and this is behind the wheel of my 996 Carrera 4S. Before, people didn't have too much respect for it because, it was kind of the more mass-produced model. It had the ugly headlights. Now, I think one of my missions and a lot of my other 996 friends, their missions are to kind of show that, yeah, it's a solid car. It's clearly a 911, and it handles as such, and it's a pretty cool car. And the more you get plugged into the community, the more you see, like, yeah, these are sexy even, and they can hang with kind of the best of them. I was born in the Philippines actually, but I came to the US when I was like 1, so mostly grew up here obviously. I grew up here in LA, originally in like the valley, in San Gabriel Valley, and then moved to this town called Arcadia here. Grew up here, went to school here, ended up going to undergrad college at UC in Santa Barbara, and then after that ended up joining kind of the finance career and moved out to New York, where I was at for like over 10 years. So my dad was super into cars. In the Philippines where he's from, he had a Lancer, like a Mitsubishi Lancer from like the 70s. And one of the cars that I remember him buying was like this old Maserati bi-turbo, which at the time, like no one knew anything about. He had a wife and 2 kids. And he bought this car, and like there's car seats in the back of this like coupe. It's totally not practical, but he's a car guy, so he wanted to get it. And so yeah, that car was super cool. I wish he still had it, but he's always been into cars, my dad. There's pictures of me going to the LA Auto Show with him when I'm like 3, 4, 5. Yeah, it's pretty fun. Well, my first car was an E36 BMW white 325 Ci or ICE. Or whatever it's called. Yeah, my dad got it for me in high school, and it was an automatic. Like, I knew I liked cars, but I didn't really, wasn't really in the scene as I am now. And so that car was an automatic. It was cool. Got me from point A to B. It was nice to drive around in Southern California with that car. It's pretty cool. Fast and Furious came out, I don't know what, late 90s, early 2000s. It was like in the time I was in high school. At that time, like me and my closest friends, we were just trying to figure out stuff to do. And one of the things that we would always kind of go to, or whenever the opportunity came up, would be to go to hot import nights and those car shows like out in the desert or down in like San Diego or wherever they were. Yeah, it was just a cool scene. I mean, all the cars are super wild, and then the movie came out as well, and so you can kind of, see that life has manifested itself into these movies now, and it was, yeah, kind of nice to see. At the time, it was, it was still fairly young, so it was just me and my buddies just going to these shows and like, hey, that's a cool looking car, let's take a picture, that's a cool looking car. And so when I got back to California, I had an E46 3 Series, which was fun to drive around in California as well. And then I ended up getting an F15 X5, and that was cool as well. I still have that as my daily. I always knew that I wanted to get into Porsches. I didn't know enough about them to know what, but I do remember the Carrera 4S specifically because of the light bar in the back. And that was just something that always kind of stuck with me. After, living in California now for a couple of years, and I was like, hey, I want a Porsche. I think now is kind of at a good place in my life financially, and I was like, let's figure out what I can get. After going on all the forums and reading a little bit about them, I mean, the idea is like you choose the best Porsche you can and get pre-purchase inspections and try to do as much research as you can before you get it. When I first got it, I was actually in New York for a couple months because my sister was living out there, and I was, working remotely. Just wanted kind of something new and exciting to kind of focus on. And while I was out there, I was like, hey, let's start looking for cars. I think we can kind of swing this and make it happen. Found like, one in Jersey, and then, you call the dealership up. Oh, we just sold it. Found another one in Connecticut. So, oh, call the dealership up. Oh, yeah, we just sold that one too. Like, you just expand the range from like New York, and I was willing to kind of go anywhere to find one. I found one that was in Virginia, in Roanoke, Virginia. And so I called the dealership up. It was like a Thursday. He's like, yeah, it's still here. You want to check it out? And I'm like, yeah. So Friday, literally 8 a.m. first flight, went to the dealership. He picked me up in the car, and you don't know enough about the car until you go see it. But it was from a Porsche dealership. I figured, they're probably the best bet. They probably did their work. They looked through the car extensively, I assume. When I saw it, I loved it, and I was like, let's do it. So I got it. So I got it in Virginia. Like the first thing that was on my mind was like, okay, I want to drive this thing cross country. I want to go and like see all the sights with the car, take a bunch of pictures with the car in all these cool places. The first thing that I did to the car was the PCCM Plus because I knew I had a road trip to do. And so I was like, we need to get this sorted. When I first got it, I think the plan was to like make everything as OEM and as clean as possible. Like I didn't really even think about like doing any mods. That just kind of organically happened. The road trip was pretty awesome. I tried my best to like see cool and interesting things that you wouldn't normally see by just flying to a destination. For example, like when I was driving through Texas, I stopped at Marfa, and Marfa was like this cool artsy-fartsy town. It was pretty awesome to be able to like take pictures of the car in front of like some of these installations, and that was kind of my favorite kind of experience. When I had an idea of getting a 911, I knew I kind of wanted that experience. It had to be a manual because doing all the digging, especially with the 996s, like that's the more desirable car is a manual. And so when I was kind of in that process of looking around, like, yeah, I was only looking for manual 996 Carrera 4S's. So I did the road trip, learned how to drive manual along the way. So I shoot up the clutch, I'm sure. Started like following a bunch of people who were on Instagram with 996s, like going down the rabbit hole of looking at all the hashtags and stuff. And then a childhood friend of mine, we actually went to elementary school together. I was following her on Instagram and I saw that she had a 996 Carrera 4S. I was like, this is wild. And then once you start following kind of the community of who's up there, kind of see where everyone's gonna be and what roads are cool, what roads are not cool. But right now, yeah, mostly driving with a group of friends. We usually go out on the weekends, every weekend, sometimes twice a week on the weekends. Before I would just kind of try to go everywhere, really, like all over LA, like Angeles Crest a bunch. Like it's kind of nice because in Southern California, you got all these backcountry roads up in Malibu, up the crest here, and even into like Santa Clarita, that area, or Ojai. So there's quite a bit to choose from, but like the flavor of the day right now is really like Malibu and all the different roads that are up there. It's like there's so many. It's interesting, like I mentioned, you know, I learned how to drive stick on this car, so I'm still not perfect. Learning how to like heel toe on these roads is super fun and interesting, I think. And like being an enthusiast, like when you hear that downshift, it sounds so awesome. But yeah, when I go up there, it's really like, let's test the limits of the car as much as you can, of course, not irresponsibly, but then also test my abilities to be able to kind of handle it. For me, I'm still not the perfect driver. I've only had a couple track days on it and a lot of canyon days, of course, but still not perfect. And the car is like more than enough for me. And so it's just about learning kind of your abilities and the car's abilities, yeah. It'll do anything you want it to do. Like through the canyons, it's more than enough. It'll hang with, you know, GT3s all day. I love it. It's very direct. It's still like very manual and very analog. And so yeah, anything I want it to do, it'll do. When I got the car, I knew I wanted to do something with it. It wasn't something that I was like, okay, I'm gonna get it and just collect it and let it sit in the garage, and I'm gonna use the car. And I use it and I'll drive it hard. When I started meeting people in the community, like that was one of the things that people did was go to autocross. I was like, okay, perfect. So now you can kind of test the limits of the car in a really controlled way. So it was nice doing that. And then with track days, it was like something that also came up with the groups. You know, it's been fun to be able to learn your car and like drive it fast and, you know, without having to worry about traffic or anything like that. And looking at it on Instagram and YouTube and stuff, you kind of see like, oh, there's a ton of people like modding the cars. Like those wheels look cool. Like, oh, that's a cool like stance this guy's got. And so you just kind of get into that world of like, hey, let's change the wheels up. Let's, you know, change the suspension. Let's start doing something because it's cool and fun to do. Getting into Porsches, the community around it itself is mostly enthusiasts. Like, yeah, you got rich people with fancier versions of the cars and that's fine, but my experience has been like, yeah, you'll get the rich people who actually know every little detail about their car and like rattle off track times. Yeah, that's the kind of crowd that I'm into, and those are the kind of people I'd like to hang out with. So Porsche community itself is, as I understand it, pretty solid community of like mostly enthusiasts. But if you're looking to get Porsche specifically, obviously buy the best one that you can afford. But then also remember, like if you're buying like a 996, 997 or even older, it's like they're 20-year-old cars, you know, they're older. So buying into the car, like that's not even where you stop. Like when I first got it, like I bought the car and then automatically dropped like 10, 12 grand just to do the IMS and all the stuff related to that. The purchase price isn't it. Like you're still gonna be having to do a whole lot of work to it, I'm sure. Get out there. There's meets every weekend in Malibu, right? It's like that's pretty consistent. So go down the rabbit hole of finding all the 996 folks in the town and, you know, follow all the hashtags, like find who the right person is and then figure out who they're all related to. Yeah, it's pretty easy. It's just, you kind of just have to go down the rabbit hole of searching for folks.